to join in. I'd like to welcome Ajit Dubey, Akshara Alex. We have 3 Akshara Alex here, so it would be great if you can rename yourself. Probably you're using the same Zoom joining link. So requesting those who have signed in as Akshara Alex, can you please rename yourself? Dinesh, Jayesh, Kishori, Mayank, Shubhangi, Somesh, Uma. Thank you for joining in today. While we are waiting for others to join in, why don't you share which city are you from, which organization are you representing today, and is there anything that you would like us to address today specifically? So while we are waiting for others to join in, since you guys have already joined in, I'm super excited to hear from you. Which city are you from, and which organization are you representing? And kindly change your chat settings to everyone. Kindly change your chat settings to everyone. Am I audible? Am I visible?
I can hear you and I can see you.
Oh, lovely. All right, because I'm not getting the responses, so I'm just wondering if I'm audible. Right. Oh, super. Thank you, Dinesh. So maybe know where are you from, Dinesh? Which city, which organization? You're from Philips. Ajit is from Philips, Bangalore. Thank you so much. Is there anything specifically that you would like us to address? Please do share and we'll make a note of it. Dinesh is from Mumbai, CCIL. Thank you for joining, Dinesh, Ajit. Right. So I'd also like to welcome Nitin Goyal, Kashmira, Somesh Patil. Okay, so let's get started, right? So attack against applications are a growing threat, putting your businesses at the risk of malware, disruption, theft, misconfiguration, exploits that leads to loss of customer trust and your reputation, right? So while organizations understand the importance of application security and are willing to put the work in, there are several obstacles that make it difficult to put everything into practice, right? Do you agree with what I just said? You want to do something about it, but there are so many challenges and obstacles that come your way that it makes it so difficult to put it into practice, right? If you agree, type in the chat box yes, or give me a thumbs up in the chat box. Okay, guys, am I audible? All right. Okay. Dinesh is from Mumbai, CCIL. Yes, I got that. Thank you, Dinesh. Thank you, Dinesh. Right. So the most challenging barriers, what could be your barriers? Is it lack of skilled resources in terms of your team, the knowledge of the team, the skill set of the team, the tools that you have, the tools that you don't have, your processes, DevOps processes, right? Other processes. It could be lack of security awareness and not having a suitable budget to secure your application, right? And you could have other challenges like shift right, shift left, or shift wherever. Or it could be implementation of DevOps, right? Or it could be scalability due to a dynamic threat landscape, right? So application security is a priority and a major concern right now. And your presence in today's webinar justifies that, right? So application security has never been more complex, nor will it ever be as simple as it is now. Developers are under constant pressure to do more from a security standpoint. And security teams are continuously facing challenges in broadening attack vectors and surfaces. So as DevOps continue to mature, organizations are trying to determine the best ways to approach the challenges of application security, right? And today we will look at the top AppSec issues plaguing businesses and what can be done to help address these pain points. So I'd like to introduce our speaker from today, Nicholas Shamsford. He has experience primarily in the European arm of MEND and especially in providing best practices when it comes to shift left methodology across the SDLC. He also comes from an engineering background and has worked in the industry for nearly 10 years. And over this time, working for unicorn startup Arrival, local government and military arms, in addition to the space sector. Right. So before handing it over to Nick, I would like to welcome all of the participants who have joined in a little later, and let's understand what are your top challenges. So for that, I'm going to be launching a poll and would love to hear from you. What are your top 3 security related challenges at present in your organizations, right? So is my poll on? I can see the poll on there. Lovely, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So what are your top 3 challenges? Okay, is it implementing software bill of materials, the regulatory requirements, aligning to compliances, or is it hidden cost of open source licensing, or the extra security overheads with each and every open source library that you use? What are your open source obligations and the risks that they bring along? Is it DevOps orchestration, how you transform AppSec from an idea to DevOps? Or is it shifting left, shifting or extending to right, or both? What is it, right? Or shipping fast takes priority over shipping secure, right? So I'd like to understand, or it could be shortage of skills, and you are not the only one. As per a survey in 2021, a 3.4 million shortfall of skills in the cybersecurity space, right? Then how do you combat all these challenges? So today, Nick is going to be sharing with us to help you address your challenges while we are waiting for everybody to respond. May I have some more participations, because I just got 42% response, and at least if we get 50% response, we know what is it, what are your top 3 challenges, and we'll try to address them today. Right? Super. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for participating. That's lovely. So, okay. While I'm waiting for a few more people, we've got 54% response. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. I'll just wait for a few more seconds. 57%, superb. May I have some more people are joining in as I see the numbers are increasing. So I'll just wait, because we want to understand what are your challenges so we can address your top 3 challenges today. Whatever this room needs today, instead of delivering what we have prepared. So we would like to see what is it that can help you. How can you take some useful insights from today's session and apply it in your organization, contribute to your organization, learning from one of the best in the world, right? So 60% responses. Thank you. Great going. So I think I'd like to share the poll results. So lovely, right? So I'm sharing the results. So we have extra security overheads with each open source usage. Number 1 topping our list with 43% saying that's the number 1 challenge. Then we have shortfall of skilled resources. That's the number 2 challenge. Then we have 35% saying shipping fast takes priority over shipping secure. And hidden cost of open source licensing and evaluating your risks, right? So these are your top challenges. Thank you so much for sharing that. And before we move on, how about considering some third-party solution as your team member, right? How about a third-party solution that becomes your employee, your team, an extended team that can do job of 10 to 15 resources, right? So on that note, I'm I'll let Nick take this forward from here.
Thank you very much. So just another quick introduction. My name's Nick Shamsford. I work for Mend. I've been in this sector for around 10 years now. I've worked for startups like Arrival, for example, which is a unicorn based in the United Kingdom, but it's got sort of factories all over the world, and it's revolutionizing and disrupting the electric car industry. I've also worked for MOD, local government, and so what I'll be doing is using my experience previously, the experience that we have with our current customers and our prospective customers at Mend, is trying to answer the questions that we have today. So these were the top 6 AppSec challenges. Let me share my screen. So these are the top 6 challenges that we have. But by the way, this is interactive. So if there's any questions that you have, write in the chat if you can, or by all means unmute and then we can ask questions there. So these are kind of the 6 challenges that we see in our day-to-day. Now, if I go back one slide, what you're going to see is basically the reason that we chose strengthening application security in the financial sector is the importance of financial sector and the fringe considerations that a financial institute needs to make when it comes to application security. So a big thing is trust, right? A financial institution 99% of the time has your money, and if you don't have trust in that organization, you're not going to give your money to that organization. And that could be the broad scheme of software that a financial institution now has. These are often software houses as much as financial institutions in the traditional sense. Even at a very basic level, you have a website, you have an app on your phone, you have internal software that you utilize internally, internal software that you expose to your partners, and it has to be accurate, has to be secure, has to be resilient. Where Mend comes in and what today's discussion is going to be based on the application security. So if you use let's say a third-party library, perhaps, how are you actually keeping up to date with the library itself, the risk that sits around it, so the vulnerabilities, the licensing, and the management of that? Who's providing the oversight, and how are security and developers, engineers, how are their intentions going to meet? So these are the 6 topics. I'll move on to the hidden cost shortly. So we'll move on to the SBOM. The SBOM is an extremely important part. As things move on, a bill of materials is a very traditional way of knowing what you have in your product, right? The laptops that you're joining on, or the phones that you're joining on, they traditionally have a bill of materials for their hardware. You know where the case is from, you know where the screen's from, so if there's a problem, that traceability is ensured. And that's where we're going with software. So a software bill of materials, there was an executive order in the States, which obviously accelerates things. There's DORA, which is coming to the United Kingdom. So that the DORA Act, the European Union, the DORA Act will be where it's going to affect application security, and SBOMs is in regard to third-party libraries. So those libraries that you're bringing in, do you know where they originate from? Do you know what licenses they have? Do you know what transitive dependencies they're pulling in? Okay, we work with a lot of people when we scan their applications. They say, oh, I didn't know we had that. And you don't explicitly have a particular library, but an upstream library, a root library, is actually using that as a transitive dependency. And it can cause all sorts of problems. So an SBOM becomes important because of that. Now, the executive order, so 14028, it states a whole load of things, but most importantly, it says that the SBOM needs to be in a machine-readable format, so JSON, or as we are standardizing things, it's now either a CycloneDX or an SPDX format that it needs to be in. And what a solution such as Mend can do is help you scan your application reliably, securely, and highly accurately, and give you the ability to pull off that SBOM. It doesn't have to be automated. If you need it, if you have it with every release, for example, that's kind of where the Mend solution comes in, and where application security comes in as a whole as well. And what it enables you to do is to broaden the scope of where you're able to do business. So in the US, you now tightly can't do business, you can't write software or distribute it without having the software bill of materials, and that'll be coming through to the European Union soon with the DORA Act. So just to recap, a BOM is standard in majority of industries, in manufacturing such as vehicles, for example, down to the nut and bolt. You know where the origin of that comes from, and it's about time that we had that for software. Okay, the software, it could be as a malicious package, for example, its origin, perhaps you would want that software bill of materials as an item. Are there any questions at all?
So just making an announcement, if you have any questions, do share it in the chat box, preferably in the Q&A box, so we can address it as and when you have questions instead of waiting till the end. Right. Thank you so much. So Nick Murali is asking, Murali is from Infinera, and one of the challenges with SBOM and SCA is when proprietary libraries are statically linked with FOSS POS libraries. Does white source Mend has any solutions to automatically identify them?
Yes, so I mean, a FOSS library would be like Apache, I think, or like MIT. So what Mend does is, actually, maybe I can even give you a demonstration of the Mend platform, what that looks like. So if I just minimize this, so in my screen, this is what the Mend platform looks like. Essentially, this is a collation of every single scan that I've run before. Let me just make sure I can still see the chat, so if any new questions come in. And on the right hand, so the first thing you're going to notice is there's a color-coded element to it. Okay, purple is critical, red is high, you have orange for medium, and you're going to notice on the right hand side we've got a license distribution. So the open source libraries here, for example, what Mend does is, let me go to a product that I'm going to demo with. You're going to notice we've got libraries, the open source library, so the third-party library, and then we've got the associated licenses. This is a big part of emphasis. This is a big emphasis point for Mend when it comes to SCA. Our aim is to be best in breed risk management for open source components. And you can see on the right hand side, we've got a breakdown of all the open source types of licensing. Some are greener than others, and some are not even green. Some are red, and some are orange. So what Mend enables you to do is identify which libraries have risky licenses. So you could say GPL, I don't want that. And you can see you have 2 libraries with GPL. If you were wondering what GPL is, which is obviously a very normal question for people to ask, what Mend does is Mend tries to break down what the terms and condition of GPL are in this particular instance, because it isn't royalty free. There's a copyright risk score as well, so there's a copyright to this. There's a copyleft element to it as well. So that's a part of your business risk, and you should know about that. So Mend's solution is to have a highly accurate mapping structure where we can tell you what the library is and what the associated license is. It's all automatic, it's not manual as well. Any solution, so next question, any solution for tracking or identifying changes in open source library? Transit dependencies, okay. Here's the thing, if you make a change to an open source library, it's no longer open source. The whole point of open source is that it's in a public repository somewhere. Everyone can make changes to it. If an individual is making certain changes to it, it's no longer open source. It becomes closed source by definition.
Right. So do we have any more questions on software bill of materials, anything related topic there? If not, we can move on. I'll just give you a couple of seconds. If you need to speak, simply raise your hand and we'll give you the, you'll get the permissions to speak. All right, then, Nick, I think we can move on.
Okay, fantastic. Let me just move back. So the other topic we come to is licensing. There's a cost to licensing. Okay, I just showed you an example with GPL. With GPL, you need to either pay to use that if you're not using it in like a development branch, for example. If it's in a release or a master, you need to pay to use it, first of all. So that's not really a hidden cost. The hidden cost comes in when a transit dependency is using GPL, your root library is using something like MIT, for example. And again, it links back to the SBOM because you've not been able to track your licensing, because you haven't had an SBOM, you've just had an Excel sheet that you update maybe once a year and things change quicker than that. You're now using a risky license, and the owners of that particular component, the license, they come after you and they say, you owe us money. This has happened. I think it happened to Panasonic. Panasonic in Taiwan, it happened to. It was a bit of software that actually goes in your planes. So you know when there's a map, you can see where you're going. That's a Panasonic is one of the companies that provides that to airlines. And it was found that had some sort of GPL licensing. They hadn't paid for it. They were using it in such a way that they were at risk of either copyleft or having to pay for the solution. And they went to court and they had to pay a settlement. So that's a hidden cost, okay? Because it's not a vulnerability that's lurking and everyone is talking about it. It's something that people don't often talk about, primarily because it's a rabbit hole. Okay. Any way to track FOSS projects that are in use, no longer actively maintained? Yes. So that's a great question. Mend has a policy engine. Okay, much like when a scan is done, there's often meta attributes to that particular open source library, and Mend has that in its database. And what the policy can do is, let's say you want to alert for a project that has not been updated for 12 months. There's been no new version for it. That's how old the library ages. What you can do in the Mend platform is you can set a policy to say, alert me to that. So let's use 12 months as an arbitrary point. And this particular license is 13 months old. It's not been updated since. What it can do, it can raise like a Jira ticket. It can alert you in the dashboard. It can provide a task. So someone has to go into the UI and actively okay that particular violation, that policy match, and say, okay, this is violating, it's 13 months old, 12 months is our threshold. I will go and look at the repository. I will make sure it's maintained, it's still up to date. So what we recommend is you have a policy for that. So 12 months is a good point. And you might find out it's no longer maintained. You might find out the name has changed, which is why there's no new version and you have to move to a different version completely in terms of like a global resource name. I hope that answers your question. So when it comes to licensing, a big part of licensing is if you're using a risky license, you are vulnerable to that particular license. It's not like a CVE, for example, where that CVE may or may not, you may not be using that open source library in such a way as outlined in the CVE. With a license, you are using that license in such a way, you are vulnerable to it, which is why there's such a focus on that now. And Mend has over 350 licenses in its catalog that we can map to. It's a big part that we take seriously, which is why we give it so much real estate on our dashboard. So I'm just going to go to the questions. So any rules for identifying libraries that are used but not the stable release, using a release candidate or beta version? Yeah, so we can identify beta versions that they're no different. So they come up in the library section. So if you're scanning your master, or let's say your feature branch, for example, it will come up and say, this is a beta version. So we can identify that as well. So let me quickly just show you what the policy engine looks like, because the policy engine is above and beyond just licensing. So let me move over. you're going to see at the top of the screen, we've got a section called policies. Now, as mentioned, policies are not just licensing, which I've got here. So I've got to block an Apache, and I've got to reject GPL because I saw what happened to Panasonic, and I had the idea that I at least want to be alerted to it. So what we've got here is a reject GPL. I've got 2 policies in my organization. That's an important thing. So this is for everyone who uses Shift Left Corp. But I can add other match functions. Okay, so much like a firewall, let's say license group, resource name, if you don't want a particular open source library, security vulnerability score. This is a top favorite. You can set criticals and you can set it to reject, and I'll show you in a dashboard. Alternatively, you can actually pull that through into your pipelines as well. Library age, that's the one in the question. Library staleness, so 12 months, you can have a reject, so it would alert you to that. Any libraries over 12 months old, you could then, it'd be like a policy, or you could set a JIRA ticket. So you would have to go in, or have someone go in and just check the library still active. Just check it's been updated, it's been maintained, patched, etc. if any vulnerabilities are associated with it. And there are some other ones in there as well. If it exists in product inventory, for example, it's going to do some sort of match. So there we have that. Are there any questions at all, or should I go on to the next topic?
So Nick, I see there are some questions in the chat. The first one, what I see is, how often the MEND database will get updated?
Okay, sorry, I can't see that in the chat. So how often? It's every 6 hours. So the MEND engine goes out every 6 hours, it does a sync, and it aggregates all the information that we get from our sources, and then your dashboard will be updated. So let's say between now and the end of today, there's a 0 day, right? And you've done a scan and it affects one of your libraries. Once that's in the MEND database, so maximum 6 hours, you'll then get an email and your dashboard will be updated to say your particular product or your application has a new vulnerability associated with it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, Nick, thanks.
Okay.
I think there was some noise. I just given permissions to speak in case people would like to speak. Right. So are there any questions on this topic? Can we move forward? Right. So there's one more question. How many varieties of software bill of material reports can be generated, and in what formats?
That's a good question. So we have 2 standardized formats, and that's SBDX and CycloneDX. And you can export it as a JSON, for example, if you wanted to put that into some sort of CM function that you have, and you can do Excel as well. You can also import as well. That's an important point. So if you already have an SBOM that's been generated from other source, you can import that into the MEND dashboard as well.
Right. Okay. Any more questions on this topic? Can we move ahead? All right. So there's one more. Do we need a script to export SBOM? Thank you, Jayesh. SBOM.
No. So we have a report section up here at the top. And how MEND does it is you can just do an SBOM export. And you can select your product. There we go. You can select a project. So that might be like a version or a particular release. And you can choose what format to do it in. So you can do CycloneDX, or you can do it like a machine readable SPDX. And you can just generate that report.
Lovely. All right, let's move forward and we can take some more questions at the later if somebody has more questions for us.
Sure, let me just open my screen share back up. So I wanted to kind of, these next 2 slides touch on the point, the second point that you had about having like a lean DevOps team, for example, and how you can still ensure security. So everywhere that I've been, and I'm sure it's the same for yourselves, there's not much fat in terms of the team, right? There's not like 10 extra people in the team. It's very quite lean, and it has been like that for some time. And generally, what tends to be the first component that suffers essentially is security. So even at a very like a system engineering level, it's Windows updates are not done as frequently. Things like secure password for this particular item is not done properly. So what tends to happen is you tend to accrue a technical debt over time. So what the MEND solution kind of aims to do is to sort of be able to scan those applications at multiple points in the development lifecycle. So if you're using an IDE, for example, let's say you're using IntelliJ for your Java development. MEND has an extension that sits in there, and you can run a scan and see what vulnerabilities you have in there before you push into your repository. If you want to scan your repository, MEND has an integration with GitHub, Azure DevOps, GitLab, Bitbucket. And what you can do is you can either scan in like an action or a pipeline, that's like a CI/CD. Alternatively, with our repository integration, what it enables you to do is to actually have active feedback all the time, have issues raised in GitHub. And what it enables you to do is you can get on with your job as normal, and you let the solution do all the hard work for you. So let me show you what that looks like. So here's a GitHub repository that I have. Okay, this is a vulnerable by default. And let's say you have an internal task to update a particular dependency. So earlier on, you were worried about how old the version of MySQL connector is. So in my POM.xml, which is my manifest for this particular Java file, I'm running version 5.02. And I want to update it to 5.25. That's the version that's been chosen. And so what I've done is I've made a change here, I've done a commit, and it's opened a pull request. You can see this pull request before you go to merge it into your master, okay? Because that's the kind of process you're going to have. You're going to have an approval workflow. You can see the MEND integrates into these security checks. You can see a license check, you can see a security check, you can see a code security check as well. So that's weaknesses in the source code. But I didn't make any change to the actual source code itself. I didn't modify any lines of code. And you can see here a security check has failed. Why is that? I've gone from version, if I look at my commit, apologies, files changed. I've gone from version 5.02 to 5.25. Why has that failed? Well, if I go back, you're going to see in the security check that I've fixed 7 vulnerabilities by going up some versions, but I've actually introduced 9 vulnerabilities. So I've got a delta of, so I've introduced 2 vulnerabilities. Now, all I did was update the library. A developer didn't have any bad intentions. They weren't doing anything wrong. They were carrying out a task that they had. And this is where MEND becomes really powerful, because if you had a branch protection rule, for example, immediately you could tell that there was a problem with this particular version, and you might make a decision to actually close this pull request, like or squash it. I don't want this, for example. Okay. Again, I've not done anything. I've not set anything up. All I've done is I've created a pull request. I've done my job, and I can update the ticket saying such. So you can kind of see how this frictionless effort, the solution there is to it, how that works. The scanning also runs on your master branch, or if you had like another branch, for example, you can see here the last commit I made, a MEND security check would run, and the information that's in the dashboard I'm getting in my repository. So again, the developer's not having to context switch, which takes time. They're not having to go to the dashboard. See, all the results are here. What library it is. If it's a transitive library, MEND will tell you what root library to update, because that's the only way you're going to fix things. So I see there's a lot of questions. Let me stop.
Yes, Nick, shall I read out the questions for you? Does that work better for you?
No, it's okay. So the first question from Sadir about MEND scan endpoint systems and find out what open source software and library systems. So so they're 2 different things. An endpoint protection is not application security as such. If you're scanning a file system that has some sort of file structure in it that has like open source in it, MEND will be able to scan that, and it will then be able to upload that information into the dashboard that you see in the cloud. Okay. So I'm reading Sardor's question. Is it necessary to have the CPE, so common platform enumerations for each software component to detect the vulnerabilities from national database? No. The way the MEND scan runs, and I think it's going to answer Vikas's question as well, is in the first instance, it looks at the package manager to resolve the direct and transitive dependencies. And then what it's going to do is a file system scan. So if it can identify like .jars, for example, and associate those with an open source component, what it does is it generates a SHA value for that, and it only sends the SHA value into the cloud. So you're not uploading your source code or project at all. That stays local to wherever it's at, wherever it's being scanned. That's MEND solution doesn't require you have to move your source code or upload anything identifiable at all. It's SHA values which are only identifiable by us. I think that's a question. No need to upload project in MEND. You can do offline scan. Yes, you can. So if you had an air-gapped network, you can potentially run a MEND scan, get I think it's a zip file, and then upload the zip file to the dashboard. That's possible. So thank you for your questions. Keep them coming. I'm just going to continue with the repository integration. And so you obviously don't have one repository. You're going to have multiple repositories. And what you're going to want to know also is, how do I scale this up? There's no point installing this because it saves you some time if it takes you time to roll this platform out, right? What you'll notice is what the MEND solution does is there's a .white source file in here, and it's referencing a particular repository that I've got in here. And if I go into here, what you're going to see is that particular repo, white source config's got two different files in it. So I've got global config JSON, and you can see I've chosen to exclude certain repositories from being onboarded. This could be like you have a particular project that you don't want to scan because it's not in scope for SCA. And what you can do is you can basically explicitly say, don't scan this. You could do the opposite as well and say, scan these particular repos, and you can quickly onboard using that particular function. Alternatively, it can globally onboard as well. So it can be very, very quickly and scale very quickly in terms of integration. Let's go back into repositories. You'll notice there was another file in there called repo config. And in the repository config, we can modify how the scan runs. So you can see here, I've got remediate, I've got renovate as well. So these are two huge functions for MEND. Renovate is, as MEND renovate, as you might have heard, is a solution whereby you can update your dependencies to the latest version. Remediate is a bit more of a reactive solution. So it would tell you to update to the least vulnerable package. Okay, so for MySQL, for example, it may not have told me to go 5125, might tell me to go to 5149, which has less vulnerabilities in it. Again, this automation is helping you save time and money by us doing all the legwork in terms of a machine doing the work rather than a human doing the work. I can raise issues as well in GitHub. So I've got my issue severity. So anything low and above, I'm going to raise an issue for. Check run, I want to display the difference. I don't want to do a fresh scan every single time. This saves me some time here. Same for SAST. And I can do things like on line 6, scan multiple branches. I've got infrastructure as code enabled on line 7. I've got license violations pulled in. So MEND will do an additional license check and an infrastructure as code check as well, if it can scan something there. Or if you're violating a license, it can warn you to that as well. Again, the importance of licensing cannot be understated. So you can see at the top here, we've got some issues, got pull requests. You can see the pull requests that have been created by MEND to update these dependencies. As you can see here, this is all automated. Take you to 3017 to 334. You can see the issues that are placed here as well. We've got some license violations because I've got my license check enabled as well. So I've got a lot of license violations. It might be that you want to pay the license owner, for example. That might be an easier way for you to do it. But again, risk management is about knowing what you have. Interestingly, this is a transitive violation. So it's not anything you're pulling in. It's actually what a SAPI is pulling in. So you may not even known about you violating it. That's where the power of this comes in. I'll just go down. You're going to see my SQL connector has multiple vulnerabilities associated with it. It's telling us what version to go to. So the version I went to, you can see the 2 vulnerabilities that I probably have introduced. That's these ones here. But I could have just easily fixed it by going to 5149. Nice and easy. Men does all the legwork. There's a tick here as well, which says that men's actually raised a PR. So whereas the developer's gone in and actually updated the POM XML, created the PR, Mend automatically does it. Doesn't need that process of trial and error, for example. Does it automatically. Let me go to the next page, just to show you the last of it. You can see the infrastructure's code violations that are presented here. We've got some code security findings as well. Now, this is not, I guess, generally in scope, but application security is SAST as well, so weaknesses in the code. There's 42 weaknesses, so that could be SQL injections, for example. Programming language for here is Java. And you can see the different SQL injections, the values, the flow of the data as it goes on. So there are a lot of problems with this particular project. Again, it's all in your repository. It saves you time. You haven't got to go to another dashboard. It's all in here. Lastly, you can see the dependency dashboard here as well. So these are all the renovate paths that we can go to. So I mentioned renovate being the solution that takes you to the latest version to update your dependencies. And what our solution can do is automatically just say, here's all the PRs that I can generate. You can tick which ones you want, and then you go from there. Right, nice and easy. When you tick it, it will then open a PR automatically. So there's that built-in automation to save you the time there. Okay, so is that okay? Does anyone have any questions, or is anyone's hands raised? Like I can't see.
Let me see. Is there anyone who has raised hands? No, not yet.
Okay. So they would have 3 topics. Let me just go back and just highlight and just go over the 6 total topics that we had, because I think we have a bit of time at the moment. So we touched on SBOM, understanding the benefits, like the requirements that come with it. It's self-explanatory why you now need one. Licensing as an addition to that is extremely important. And the last 2 we just touched on now. So the shifting left, having like a lean team, for example, and how allowing Mend automation to handle things for you rather than you doing it is really going to be the way forward for you in terms of saving time, gaining visibility. Now, the reason we mentioned financial institutions is because not only do they use our solutions, but they're the power users of the solutions. They're the ones that kind of keep ahead of the curve. And generally, where those financial institutions go, everyone else tends to follow, which is why it's so centric on those institutions today. It's much more important for them to have an application security tool, because they realize even the minute risks can become a big problem later on.
So do we have any more questions? Would you like to ask Nick something, take some insights from his experience working with important organizations for whom security is a major concern? So we'll wait to hear if you have any questions. Simply you can unmute yourself and ask the question, or you can share that in the chat box. So we also have a quiz coming up, and there are some goodies to be won. So your active participation will help us address your challenges. So just waiting for you to ask more questions, or if you need any solution to a specific challenge that you're facing, Nick is available to answer that for you today.
Hi Nick, this is Sudhir.
Right.
Hi, Sudhir, how are you?
I'm fine. Nick, I have one query. For example, if I want to customize the report in Mint, for example, as per our organization, we are not just looking after the securities in the open source libraries. We are also thinking about blocking of few libraries like the application should not use GPL or LGPL libraries. So if I want to customize the report in such a manner, can I do that in Mint?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can use a due diligence report to do that. You can see what licenses you're using, for example. You can even do a license report. Let me see if I can find it. See if I can find it for you. So this is the due diligence report. I think it answers the question in the chat as well. The due diligence report is generally used for M&As, mergers and acquisitions for larger institutions. So they can see what licenses are being pulled in, for example. You can even do it across the organization, and you can set a filter for license value of, like, let's say GPL, and it should filter, and you can see where you've got it, what library has it, and kind of what the homepage of the license is, for example. So yes, you can do that.
So, Sudhir, to add up one more pointer along with Nick, you can set up a policies in Mint in such a way that if your internal organization says, or your internal organization legal team says GPL licensed component should not be used, you can create a policy in such a way that if someone is violating such policies, it will be reported as part of policy violation. The same will be reported as part of risk report. In the same way, if you integrate Mint as part of a CI/CD setup, you can make the job to be failed if someone is violating such rules what you have created. So all these things can be automated. It's like it's against your or maybe like as per your legal team's requirement. So you can commit your job failed against security vulnerabilities. You can commit your job failed as per specific licenses like GPL, LGPL. So there are many ways to do that in Mint.
Thanks, Eva, for the information. We will connect on this.
Thank you
So
so much, Sudhir.
thank you, Shiva. Thank you, Sudhir, for asking that question. Ajit, please go ahead. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Nick, thanks for a very nice explanation. I have a different question, rather technical. What should be the estimate, percentage of effort to be thought if we are planning to do a development, design, security by design? So any rough, thought we should keep in mind while doing estimation of any new product development or new product initiatives?
That's a good question. I would always say to scan early, go to the latest version, for example. That's always a big thing when people are scanning the solution, right? And they look at things and say, oh, like we've got a lot of out-of-date versions, for example, because they're not thinking of how things can scale, how things are compatible as things goes on. But if you're designing a solution, I would always say scan early, know what's in there. So like in an IDE, for example, utilize the repository scanning. Okay, so let that do its work and find the license violations that you don't want, the security vulnerabilities that you're not willing to accept, because that's the reality, right? Even the latest version of a particular library can have a vulnerability, but you have to be willing to accept it or have some sort of mitigation in place. So scan often, scan early is really the core thing to remember as you go on.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Do we have more questions? I think there's a question from Shubhangi. How does the due diligence report look like in Mint?
So I showed that in, so if I go due diligence, I'll show it again. So you can see here, basically, due diligence refers to the license part. So you're kind of, if you're wondering, and this is where kind of Mend started out, right? So when a solution was being sold and the person purchasing solution wanted to know what was in the software in terms of open source. And this is kind of the very first report that was there. So it's a due diligence report of seeing what licenses you're using, what type it is, if it's open source, closed source, etc., and seeing where those licenses are used. So this is where it is. One, the risk report as well, which Stevie mentioned, is really good. So the risk report is an aggregation, so it joins loads of different reports that Mend does, into a single report. And what our customers do, whether they write software for other people or they have software internally, is when they have the release notes, they have this along with it. So this is now a part of the solutions release notes, along with maybe like a pen test, for example. And the reason is because it tells you, it gives you a really good idea, and you don't have to be like a developer or you don't have to be a security person. You could be anyone to understand it. You've got the aging security vulnerabilities, how old the vulnerabilities are. It points to how often you're actually addressing the vulnerabilities that you have. By extension, it gives you a quality score. So how often you're updating your components, which is a huge thing, right? Windows updates, it's an update that's done to the laptop to keep it secure, right? That's a fundamental part, keeping things up to date. And you've got a license split as well. If you've got high risk licenses, it shows your policy violation. So if you're violating any organizational risk or accepting any organizational risk. And as you go down, it shows all of your security vulnerabilities. Again, color coded, nice and easy. It shows your out-of-date libraries, and it color codes how outdated you are. So you can see here, one is orange because it's not as out of date. This one's very out of date, 136 new versions. So it's all about painting a picture so you can see how things stand. So you can even use this internally to say this particular development team isn't doing good enough, they need to make things better. That's what it's there for. It's there as a guarantee, and something for you to have to stand behind and say this needs to be better, or we're doing good, or we're getting better. Jayesh asked a question in the chat about integrate Mend with Eclipse. So we integrate with a whole host of IDEs, IntelliJ, Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, WebStorm, Eclipse, PyCharm, for example. Mend has a YouTube page as well, and how to integrate into all of these IDEs. They're all on there, along with how to integrate into repositories, our different features that we might have as well. So if anyone's interested a bit more and you want to sort of spend your own time on it, Mend has a YouTube page that's updated frequently as well.
Right. All right. Do we have more questions for Nick? Anybody else wants to ask anything? If you are a person who would like to speak, simply unmute yourself. And if you would like to type, then please type your question in the chat box. And is there anything that we have not yet addressed and you would like to know? Please let us know. Now is the time. All right. Yeah.
Nick, one thing quickly. So I have actually got a lot of questions which comes to me in terms of the remediation part, because that's one of the key feature which has been meant discussing and talking about. And a lot of people have actually asked us that how that happens to be better off than the competition products around, and how easy it is to incorporate that. So if you can just touch upon some remediation part of then that will be really helpful.
Sure. So I guess the remediation, I think we're the only one who does a least vulnerable package. So we're not just updating you to the latest version, or we're fixing what you've got and introducing new like vulnerabilities. There's some intelligence in the background. So we're taking you to the least vulnerable version. And as far as I'm aware, Mend is the only one who does that in this particular field. So you can kind of see just from that particular feature where our focus is on. It's to automation's great. Automation done badly is not good, because you're now checking the machine's work. So the integration is super simple. You can see in my global configuration, I've got some settings here, and this is all done by default. So the minute you onboard Mend, which is a marketplace application, you link it to your Mend subscription, the remediation part begins. And how that looks in terms of in terms of process is the white source file is onboarded into a repository via a pull request. The minute that's done, the scans begin, right? So the security check runs. And you can see here the results are presented. And then in the background, what we do is we say, okay, we can take you to this version of ASAPI 2.3. Great. This particular upgrade features multiple times. Here's a pull request for you to go to that newer version. And then what we do is the mend check will run on the PR that mend generates internally. So it can then again give you feedback about what version you're going to. We're not saying trust us, we're saying we're doing our own homework on our own solution as well. So we can take you to a least vulnerable package. That's the idea, is to get you to a safe zone with this solution.
Perfect. That helps.
Cool.
Right. So in case you would like to have a detailed demo with your team, I've shared a link in the chat box. Please do sign up so we can give priority to you. I also have a question, Nick. So how has some of the clients benefited from this solution, right? What was the outcome of applying this solution, Nick?
So it always comes down to your reason for wanting it. It can come down to you need it to do business, which is a big thing. If you have a client or a customer that's saying to you, I need this particular solution, I need to know what's in your software, it enables you to have continue that particular relationship, continue obviously it's money, isn't it? It's business. Also, it enables you to be better in development, and that's really what the big thing that comes back. It's we can still do our jobs, but we're not having to actively think about security, manually check things. So in a weird way, it frees up time to do other things, which is a huge help. The one thing that people don't tend to see is how security and development tend to be on separate paths, right? It's like a push and a pull. Both have different focuses, needs and wants. And what it tends to do is to provide a solution that both are satisfied with and both are happy with. So the developers get the repository integration, they get all of the results in the dashboard, security get the mend UI, they can set policies, they can have a level of enforcement, they can pull reports, for example, and it enables them to have oversight. So that's a huge thing. That not many pieces of software tend to do that, and that's really like the biggest thing that we see.
Right. Yeah, you're saying something. Go ahead. Sorry.
So lastly, we get it all the time is people don't know what transitive dependencies are pulling in, and they don't even know what transitive dependencies sometimes they have. A huge thing, whether that's on a proof of concept, whether that's a customer, is they find out they have issues they didn't know about, that they maybe would never have known about, and they're able to fix that. That's the biggest part. It's always risk management, and without having something to tell you the risk, spending a lot of time having to work that risk out, where that is, what that is. And the solution often takes blind spots that you have and gives you that information. And that's really the biggest part of this application security field that we try and give to people.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So I also have one more poll. Okay, so just wanted to understand what is going to happen in this space, right? I mean, what's trending in 2023 and beyond, right? How organizations will be taking care of their AppSec related challenges. So I've launched the poll, so let's hear it from the room, right? What do you think will be the top 3 trends in 2023 for AppSec, right? Organizations would be increasing their budgets for application security in the coming years, right? And would organizations take deep dive into scaling strategies in a dynamic threat landscape, or organizations would implement world-class third-party solutions for enhanced security measures, right? So to reduce development costs, shorten the time to market, right? And continue to retain your reputation and client trust, right? And would organizations be arming themselves with necessary security challenges that comes with AI ML adoption, and keep up with detecting and preventing attacks. New strategies for keeping up with detecting and preventing attacks, right? So lovely, we have yeah, just keep coming. I'm getting your participations. Would love to see some more people respond to this poll. So far, we have 80% people saying implementing world-class third-party solutions for enhanced security measures. Lovely, that's a beautiful take, and that's what will happen in 2023, and MEND has solution for that. So thank you so much for answering that. We have 67% people saying arming themselves with new security challenges that comes with AI ML adoption, right? So I'll just wait for a few more seconds. Need some more participation to actually conclude to come to a result. Lovely. Can I have some more participation, please? Lovely. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Right. Lovely. I'm going to end the poll now, and I'll share the results with all of you. So let's have a look at the results. Right. So, okay. So some numbers have changed here. Organizations and as security experts, you would like to arm yourself with whatever it takes to handle the AI ML related security challenges that are going to come up. Okay, so thank you so much for your active participation today. And if we have not addressed anything for you, please let us know. If you would like to have a detailed demo with your team, please do connect with Team Meteonic. And I also have a quiz. And before we go to the quiz, Anirban, do you want to share something about MEND and Meteonic?
Definitely, why not? Okay, just to give a perspective of what we just discussed in terms of the numbers, because we were just talking about in the perspective of how MEND can be effective and what is the kind of, because one of the questions that came up is, if you are implementing a solution like MEND, how much we are basically going to get benefit out of that particular thing. So I think I have a slide just for exactly showing up that. Just a second. I'll just, yes, so if you can just see that slide across. So this is exactly how you can benefit. So if you see this, so MTTR, which is basically the mean time to a kind of remediation, that is basically something which is very critical. And we come up with the particular questions very often that, okay, I have a particular problem. There are solutions which can find the problem for me. How about to remediate? So this is something which critically a tool like MEND helps. And we have seen a lot of traction around that. And another part is basically about the real-time application visibility. So the dashboard of this particular solutions which MEND like tool comes up with, that's a real-time scenario that you can actually get, which can give you a kind of a very good understanding of where you stand. So these are some of the kind of numbers that we have come up with. And I think they are quite more realistic numbers that you can relate to your normal work day in and day out. And in fact, the kind of whatever the kind of things we have got from the clients that we were actually discussing so far is about this part. So this is exactly I was mentioning a bit earlier, that there's a shift in terms of how people used to think about the AppSec scenario and how they think now, and where exactly a tool like MEND comes into play. Just to add on, the word MEND actually came up now because it has been a transition from white source to MEND. And the reason where that particular wording has come up is they wanted to actually create a kind of a space where they get holistic kind of a remediation approach, both on the SaaS part as well as the SCA part. So they have both sides of it. So that is just a kind of an understanding. And one thing that I think, Nick, you can also highlight on about the prioritization, because there's something which is a bit more also in trending, that which one we should take first and remediate, and which one we should take later, which we can actually park later on. So that is also something. Nick, any notes from your end on that part?
Yeah, so what prioritization does, if you scan in your pipeline for certain languages like Java, backend JavaScript and Python, what it does, it doesn't just tell you what vulnerabilities you have, it goes above and beyond. So it tells you if you're calling on a vulnerable function. So by calling on a vulnerable function, you are actually vulnerable to that CVE, which is what prioritization or reachability aims to do, is to give you the first handful, let's say, of vulnerabilities that you should fix in your next sprint. So it's not to say to everything else needs to be ignored. It's just an idea, if you were kind of really in technical debt, where you should start. That's really where prioritize comes in. Like, let's say before a release or something like that.
Right. And just to give you some kind of a notes about the participants here in terms of what Meteonic as a company does. So we are a kind of a technical consulting company, you can say, which has a kind of a cluster of different kind of tools, different kind of technologies, stacks, and things like that, which actually helps people to actually address, obviously, things like AppSec. And we have certain solutions which helps you to do a kind of deep dive analysis in terms of your code navigation. If you talk about code discovery, in terms of if you want to restructure or things like that, in terms of your application or things like that. And obviously, we have a handful of experts in-house available, who can actually thread these particular requirements of your in one go. And that's what we do. We have been actually in presence for almost more than 17 years as of, and we have quite a handful of clients as of. And thanks Nick and team Mend to actually be of support for so long. And thanks a lot for being in this particular webinar. Thanks a lot, guys.
Right. Thank you, Anirban. So it's time for the quiz. So I'm sharing the link in the chat. Simply scan that. Or you may want to scan this QR code or sign using the link. So I am going to start the game. Lovely. Okay.
Mr. Steam.
All right.
Dr. Snail. Foolish woman. Engineer one. Lady boy. Captain Police Lion. Hacker. Quick hyena.
Right, I'll give some more time for participants to join in. All right, and then you can start the game.
Quiz.com. Players create join.
What is the main challenge associated with open source software in AppSec for banking and fintech organizations?
The aim bot join.
Rapidly detecting and fixing software vulnerabilities.
All right, we have the next question.
How can organizations balance development productivity with higher regulatory and internal security requirements in AppSec? Integrate security into the development workflow.
Moving on to the next one.
What is the best way to protect against supply chain attacks in AppSec for banking and fintech? Use technology to proactively block malicious alerts on existing threats.
All right, two more to go.
And how can it help improve AppSec in banking and fintech? Software bill of materials, improving visibility, vulnerability management.
The last one.
Final question. Double points.
What is the main benefit of integrating security into the SDLC for AppSec in banking and fintech? Saving time, money by identifying, fixing security issues earlier.
Right. So,
Third place, hacker. Second place, the aimbot. And the winner is Lady Boy.
you may want to share your actual names in the chat box, so our team can reach out to you with the goodie bag. So you know with what name you signed up. So please do share your names. Do we have the winners here? Let me see. Who was the winner? I think Lady Boy. If you can let us know your name and organization, Sir Aimbot and Hacker, 3 of you. Let us know your real names in the chat box. And then, okay, Sriram is our Lady Boy, lovely. Shardul is the Hacker. You're from IXC, thank you so much. This Aimbot, Sir Aimbot. So, okay, Nitin from Medtronic, right? Vishnu. All right, we have 2 people claiming to be the Lady Boy. So let's okay, we can take this later with the team, but thank you so much for your participation. Thank you so much, team Men, Nick, Louis, for facilitating this webinar, and I hope we were able to provide some value to the people who participated in today's session, and we look forward to serving you with much more insightful webinars in future. Nick, is there anything that I missed that you want to cover, or can we?
No, just thank you for your time.
Right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, and we look forward to serving you again. Take care. Bye for now. And those who have attended can claim your certificate of participation. Team Meteonic will reach out to you for that. Take care. Have a nice evening. Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.